Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house had become an annual exercise in public humiliation, and this year was shaping up to be no exception. I sat at the familiar mahogany table, watching Mom arrange the fine china while Dad carved the turkey with ceremonial precision, both of them practically vibrating with excitement to share my brother's latest achievements. David just closed the biggest deal in Goldman Sachs history, Mom announced before we'd even finished saying grace. $7 billion. $7 billion. Can you imagine? At 27, I'd long since given up trying to compete with my older brother's financial success. David was everything my parents had dreamed of: Harvard MBA, corner office in Manhattan, seven-figure bonus, and a lifestyle that screamed success to anyone willing to listen. That's wonderful, I said, cutting my turkey into small pieces. I'm happy for him. Dad beamed across the table. He's being fast-tracked for managing director. Youngest in the firm's history. The headhunters are already calling from other banks, offering him ridiculous packages. I nodded politely while checking my phone discreetly. 3 missed calls from my office, which was unusual for Thanksgiving Day. My work at the State Department didn't typically generate holiday emergencies, at least not the kind that my family would consider important. And what about you, Rachel? Mom's voice carried that particular tone of forced optimism she used when discussing my career choices. How's your little government job going? Little government job. After 4 years, she still couldn't bring herself to acknowledge that I worked in international relations, choosing instead to treat my position like a temporary career detour before I came to my senses and pursued something more lucrative. It's going well, I said simply. Busy but interesting work. I'm sure it is, dear. Very stable. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur like David, after all. Some people are just better suited to following procedures and taking directions. Dad nodded sagely. There's nothing wrong with government work, Rachel. Regular hours, good benefits, job security. It's just safe. Not particularly ambitious, but safe. Safe. As if coordinating diplomatic responses to international crises was equivalent to filing paperwork in a suburban office park. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Urgent. Embassy crisis in Southeast Asia. Situation room requesting immediate consultation. How quickly can you be reached? I glanced around the table where my parents were now detailing David's latest property acquisition. A penthouse in Soho that apparently cost more than most people made in a decade. Rachel seems distracted, Mom observed. Are you even listening? This is important family news. Sorry, just checking messages. On Thanksgiving? Dad frowned. That's the problem with government work. No respect for personal time. In the private sector, David has people to handle things when he's unavailable. That's what real success looks like, having others manage the details while you focus on strategy. My secure phone began ringing from my purse. A different device entirely, one that my family had never noticed during these gatherings. The ringtone meant only one thing: international emergency requiring immediate senior-level response. I need to take this, I said, standing from the table. Rachel, Mom's voice carried a warning edge. We're having family dinner. Whatever filing emergency you're dealing with can wait until tomorrow. Filing emergency. I almost laughed at the irony as I walked toward the kitchen to answer the most important phone call of the day. The call was from Director Walsh at the State Department's Operations Center, and his voice carried the kind of tension that made my stomach drop. Rachel, we have a critical situation developing in Malaysia. The American embassy in Kuala Lumpur is under siege, and we need immediate diplomatic intervention. How quickly can you coordinate an international response? I glanced back at the dining room, where my family was discussing David's investment portfolio with the enthusiasm typically reserved for religious conversion. I can be operational within minutes, I said quietly. What's the situation? Terrorist organization has taken hostages, including 3 American financial executives who were there for banking negotiations. Malaysian government is requesting our immediate assistance, but they specifically want our senior crisis coordinator to manage the response. That's you. Financial executives. Banking negotiations. The irony was almost too perfect. I'll coordinate from here until I can get back to DC. Send me the briefing materials. Already en route to your secure device. Rachel, this is going to be front-page international news within hours. The president has been briefed and we're implementing Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was reserved for situations that could escalate into international incidents or military responses. As I ended the call, I could hear my mother's voice drifting from the dining room. The thing about Rachel is she's never been particularly driven. Even in high school she was content with B's while David was valedictorian. Some children are just comfortable with mediocrity. Comfortable with mediocrity. While I coordinated responses to international hostage situations, my secure device buzzed with the briefing materials. The situation was worse than Director Walsh had initially indicated. The hostages included executives from Goldman Sachs, my brother's firm, who had been in Malaysia negotiating a major infrastructure deal. The terrorist organization was demanding both financial concessions and political changes that could destabilize the entire region. I returned to the dining room where the conversation had shifted to my personal life, or rather my apparent lack thereof. David's engagement party is next month, Mom was saying. His fiancée is lovely. Stanford MBA works in venture capital. They're perfect together, both so accomplished and ambitious. Dad nodded approvingly. That's what happens when you put yourself in environments with other successful people. Rachel, you really should consider changing careers. Government work doesn't exactly attract high achievers. High achievers. As if preventing international conflicts was somehow less impressive than managing investment portfolios. My secure device buzzed again with an update. The Malaysian Prime Minister was requesting direct communication with the U.S. government's senior crisis specialist. Me. Within the hour. You know what Rachel needs? Mom continued. A real challenge. Something that would push her out of her comfort zone and make her realize her potential. Government work is just too easy. You show up, follow the rules, collect your paycheck. Easy. I was currently reviewing intelligence reports about a hostage situation that could trigger a diplomatic crisis between 3 countries, but apparently that qualified as easy in my mother's assessment. The irony was becoming unbearable, especially as my phone rang again with another urgent update. My secure phone rang loudly just as Mom was describing David's latest bonus structure. The distinctive ringtone, different from any civilian device, cut through their conversation like a fire alarm. Rachel, please silence your phone, Dad said irritably. This is family time. But the caller ID made my blood run cold. POTUS Situation Room. I answered immediately. Rachel Morrison speaking. Ms. Morrison, this is General Harrison from the White House Situation Room. We have an escalating hostage crisis in Malaysia involving American citizens, and we need our senior diplomatic coordinator to brief the president immediately. My family's conversation stopped dead. The formality in my voice and the obvious gravity of the call had finally penetrated their bubble of financial success stories. Yes, sir. I have the briefing materials and I'm prepared to coordinate the international response. Outstanding. The president wants to speak with you directly in 10 minutes. Are you secure for communications? I can establish secure comms immediately. Rachel, Mom whispered, her face pale. Who is that? I held up a finger, still focused on the call. General Harrison, I should mention that the hostages include executives from Goldman Sachs who are conducting banking negotiations. This could have significant financial market implications beyond the immediate diplomatic concerns. Understood. That's exactly why we need you managing this. Your expertise in both diplomatic protocol and international finance makes you uniquely qualified for this situation. As I ended the call, my family stared at me in complete silence. Rachel, Dad's voice was barely audible. What just happened? Before I could answer, my phone rang again. This time I answered on speaker. Rachel Morrison. Ms. Morrison, this is Secretary of State Williams. The President has authorized me to brief you on the developing situation in Malaysia. We're implementing emergency diplomatic protocols, and you're designated as lead crisis coordinator. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Secretary of State? Ma'am, Secretary Williams continued, not knowing he was on speaker. The Malaysian Prime Minister has specifically requested you by name for negotiations. Your reputation in Southeast Asian diplomatic circles is exactly what we need right now. The turkey dinner sat forgotten as my family processed the fact that their failure daughter was about to coordinate an international crisis response with world leaders. David's Goldman Sachs bonus suddenly seemed very small indeed. The next 12 hours transformed our Thanksgiving from family dinner into international crisis headquarters. I coordinated the successful release of all hostages, including 3 Goldman Sachs executives whose lives had hung in the balance while my parents discussed David's investment strategies. The irony was exquisite. My brother's colleagues owed their lives to his unsuccessful sister's diplomatic expertise. The aftermath was swift and devastating. When David's firm learned that their crisis coordinator was related to an employee who dismissed her as a family failure, his fast track to managing director derailed immediately. Banks don't promote people whose families insult senior State Department officials. Mom's social circle crumbled when the story broke. Local woman coordinates international hostage crisis during family dinner. Her dismissive comments about my little government job became social media fodder. Dad never recovered from learning that his safe daughter earned more than David and held security clearances that made her one of the most trusted officials in government. I spent the following Thanksgiving coordinating peace talks in Geneva. The president sent his personal gratitude, but I didn't need it. Watching my family's assumptions collapse had been reward enough. David's $7 billion deal seemed remarkably small compared to preventing international wars.